Hello and welcome to Digital Theory and Applications Learning Outcomes 2 and 3. Today I will show and discuss how I operate a digital audio workstation within a studio context. Today I will be using Pro Tools 10 as it is considered an industry standard DAW. When starting up a new session, you are given session parameters. You can create a new session from a template if you know what genre you're going to be producing, or you can create a blank session, which I'm going to be doing today. Within the session parameters, you're given a few different options. Within the file type, you can choose a WAV file or an AIFF file. Today I'll be choosing WAV. Bit depth determines the clarity of the track. 16-bit tracks give you 65,000 quantization levels, whereas a 24-bit track give you 60 million. The more bits in the track, however, equals a bigger file size, as a 32-bit floating point file is 50% bigger than a 24-bit file. So to summarise, the more bits equals the better clarity, but the more bits equals bigger file size. The sample rate can go up to 192 kHz, all the way from 44.1 kHz. But as determined by Nyquist's theorem, for the best audio result, the sample rate should be twice the highest frequency. This also helps avoid jitter later on in the process. Also, the mix style, I will be choosing stereo mix, although you can choose a 5.1 surround sound mix. When you save your parameters, you are given the option to save your file. Best to choose a safe and memorable location on your computer so the file can be quickly and easily accessed. I already have a file on the desktop which I will use today. When the session loads, you will see there is an edit window and a mix window. On the edit window, at the top, there is a timeline bar. And as you can see, there are multiple timelines that you can use, such as bar, beats, timecode, samples, and tempo. These can all help you depending on what kind of project you are working on. For today, I'm only going to use beats, bars, and minutes and seconds. Let's add a new track to show you how to record in Pro Tools 10. So I've now added an audio track. Returning back to the mix window, you can see it is inserted there as well. I can now change the in and output settings so I can record and listen back to what I'm recording. I will quickly record to show you what it looks like. Now I'll import some audio. You may need to import audio for a reference track or from other projects when you are starting a new project in Pro Tools. To select multiple files, click on the first one, slide down to the bottom, hold Shift and click again, and that will select everything. You will then be able to convert the files to match the project settings you selected earlier on. I'm not going to do this as I already have a project I have started, so I will import the session data from my previous project. The window looks slightly different, but it operates exactly the same. There again, you can select to add the tracks into a new track. You can do this to them all by clicking on the first one and selecting new track, going down to the bottom and shift clicking again, which will set them all to new track. There are other options which you can change if you are doing it in a multimedia context. And at the top left there are source properties, which shows you the properties of the previous file. And down the bottom you can import additional data into the new session. Now that I have my session loaded, I I will delete this audio track as it's not needed anymore by going to Track, Delete. A cool feature in Pro Tools 10 and onwards is that you can view the automation on top of the waveform. So if you want to make a specific edit to a specific part of the waveform, you can do this by selecting the pencil tool and drawing in the automation. Also, if you have instruments grouped together by pressing Command G and selecting what instruments you want in the group, you can make the edits to multiple different instruments at the same time. Now going back to the mix window, you can see a couple of tracks you've not met before. The auxiliary tracks, which are the green ones, and the master track, which is the red one. Now we'll talk a little bit about plugins. In Pro Tools there are three types of plugins: Audio Suite plugins, DSP plugins, and native plugins. DSP plugins work off the HDX card, which is the main interface of Pro Tools. These take up less stress on the CPU, but there are only a limited number of DSP slots. Native plugins work off the computer CPU, which puts more pressure on the processing and can slow down the CPU. But what's handy about an auxiliary track is you can insert one plugin onto the auxiliary and send it to multiple at the same time, which takes up less processing power. You change the insert to a bus, and then you send that to the different instruments that you wish to send the effect to. Audio Suite plugins work slightly different. You have to highlight a specific section of the track that you wish to add the plugin to, and for example, I'll add a compressor onto the highlighted section. You will adjust your settings in the compressor to what you want, and then you'll press the render button down the bottom right hand corner. That will render the settings onto that specifically highlighted part of the track. I don't want to, so I'll just cancel it for now. Audio Suite plugins are used for more specific edits within the track. Now I'll talk a little bit about the master track. The master track controls the overall level of the whole mix. On the master, I have inserted a compressor and a maximum. The compressor is just a light compressor, just to control the dynamics of the overall mix. The maximum, set to -10 dB, is to comply with the BBC standard. I won't use the master channel to do a proper master of my track. I will export it and then do a proper master later on. Now we'll talk about a few of the setup preferences within Pro Tools. The playback engine is set to the HDX, which is Pro Tools' default playback engine. From Pro Tools 10 and onwards, you can integrate external interfaces, such as the Focusrite Scarlett, to be able to work within Pro Tools. Buffer size can be changed depending on whether you're recording or mixing. For recording, it's better to have a lower buffer size, as there will be less latency, but there will be more pressure on the computer. A higher buffer size gives more latency, but there's less computer processing. The host processors determine how many processors are used for plugins. CPU usage limit caps how much CPU Pro Tools is allowed. Delay compensation makes up for the delay that is caused by the buffer. And the cache determines how much memory is dedicated to Pro Tools. Now I'll talk about disk allocation. Disk allocation shows where all the tracks are stored on the computer, if you ever forget. The I/O settings show the routing of the ins and outputs of the computer system. As you see here, the routes through the HDX system are in sequential order from 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, all with their pairing numbers. But as you can see, they can be altered to suit your preference. But for the most part, it's best to have them under the default as it makes sense. The disk space and system usage shows how much memory and storage is being used by Pro Tools and other programs within the computer. Also, the Task Manager shows what actions Pro Tools is carrying out at the time. This will be more apparent when you're importing or exporting tracks. When you have listened through to your session enough and you feel like your mix is ready to export, you go to File, Bounce to Disk. Typically you would think to go to Export, but this is more for session data or MIDI files if you're going to work on a different system. When clicking on Bounce to Disk, you're set with more options. First, you can choose the bounce source, if you want to bounce from the main stereo outputs or if you want to bounce individual tracks. Again, you are allowed to select the file type, and again you have WAV and AIFF, both uncompressed lossless audio types. Another that's very popular is MP3, which is a compressed lossy audio type. The benefits for WAV and AIFF is that they have more audio within them, and the MP3 loses some of the clarity within the audio, but doesn't take up as much disk space as the WAV and AIFF. The format type is best set to interleaved, which gives a stereo representation of the master channel. Again, you can choose the bit depth and sample rate, and this is where you would change it if you're going to use settings for a CD mix. You can also select when you want to do conversion processes, and you can also import your bounced track after it has been bounced into your mix. And again, you can choose the file location for where you want to save your bounce. After you've done that, your track will export.